Initiating the English opening immediately contests central space and prepares for flexible pawn structures and potential queenside pressure. A hypermodern approach, this fianchetto prepares to control central squares from afar. Developing the king's bishop to this fianchetto prepares a solid pawn structure, aiming for a flexible setup. Asserting central influence, black challenges white's fianchettoed pawn with immediate territorial ambition. Securing the long diagonal for the bishop, this solidifies the fianchetto and prepares for central control with nc3. Unlocking the diagonal for a kingside fianchetto offers excellent long-term scope for the bishop. Fortifying the d4 square, this knight establishes a solid central presence while eyeing potential queenside expansion. Developing the knight to its natural square, this pawn knight immediately reinforces control over the center and prepares for pawn breaks. Developing knights like this one naturally enhances kingside defense and prepares for central pawn pushes. Developing the knight to the rim here sacrifices valuable central influence and potential king safety. Aggressively grabbing space on the kingside, white aims to disrupt black's pawn structure and potentially open lines towards the monarch. Introducing d6 solidifies black's central pawn structure and prepares for potential piece development while cautiously respecting white's aggressive pawn thrust. Solidifying the center and preparing to develop the queenside, this move aims for a robust pawn structure. Bringing the rook to the b-file prepares for potential activity on the queenside, aiming to contest open files or support pawn advances. Pushing the pawn aggressively, white opens lines but risks weakening their own king's shelter. Establishing a supportive square for the knight and preparing to contest the center, this piece calmly anchors black's defenses. Sacrificing the bishop here opens lines, potentially exposing black's king and creating active play for white's remaining pieces. Capturing the bishop on h6 opens the g-file, potentially creating a lasting weakness around black's king that white will surely exploit. Smashing open the h-file, now white eyes that exposed black king for a swift attack. Opening the h-file unleashes attacking potential, but your king's safety now requires vigilance amidst the unleashed pawn storm. Unveiling the queenside's potential, this declaration prepares to exploit open lines and pressure black's nascent pawn structure. Re-establishing the fianchetto strengthens the light-squared diagonal and prepares for potential pawn advances on the queenside. Forcing a trade spiel to unlock the h-file presents interesting endgame possibilities. A forced recapture opens the h-file, potentially exposing the king's defenses. Seizing the open file with the queen injects immediate pressure toward the vulnerable black king. Opening the bishop pair, a decisive positional blow, now clears the way for a swift queenside counterthrust. Opening the b-file for the rook creates long-term pressure, but compromises the pawn structure around your king. Unlocking the queenside pawns feels a tad premature given the compromised kingside structure. Unleashing the knight, white eyes the weakened black kingside and probes for tactical opportunities. Relocating the monarch to a less exposed central square offers a measure of safety from immediate threats, while potentially preparing for future pawn advances. Securing the king with a vital retreat, this maneuver prioritizes safety amidst the growing chaos on the board. Prioritizing the queen's open path, black reroutes the bishop to a more active diagonal, seeking improved coordination with the remaining pieces. Unleashing the queen into black's territory, this maneuver seeks to exploit the exposed king and create immediate mating threats. The monarch's repositioning, though seeming passive, aims to connect the rooks and activate the king's defensive network, a vital step before the inevitable pawn pushes. Expanding the pawn front dramatically opens lines, aiming to destabilize black's unusually placed king. Exploring the open h-file, black aims to reposition the queen for potential counterplay. Liberating the rook to control the open file, it eyes the black king's precarious defense. Initiating a cautious retreat to the queenside allows the knight a chance to regroup, potentially rerouting towards more active squares and reinforcing the kingside defense. Exploiting the now open king's flank, the knight leaps into a superior central outpost, threatening both pawn advances and king safety. The black monarch courageously ventures further into enemy territory, seeking safety behind a soon-to-be-formed pawn shield. Unleashing the rook to the 8th rank, immediately pressures black's isolated king and aims to seize the open file. Opening the bishop to its potential outpost, it strategically eyes the queenside and prepares to support a pawn push. Hoping to trap the black king, white sacrifices mobility for a potentially open attacking avenue towards the exposed monarch. Shifting the king toward the queenside might be an attempt to outrun the inevitable pawn storm, but it leaves critical squares exposed. Opening the bishop frees up attacking lines, though it concedes the dark square control you'd built. Reclaiming the knight after the pawn exchange solidifies central control and aims to untangle the bishop chain. Seeking to exploit the open file, this thrust aims to isolate black's king and initiate a decisive assault. The knight embarks on a perilous journey, seeking to escape the looming threat on the king side. Pouncing on the d-pawn opens lines, but leaves your king exposed to potential knight forks. Seeking refuge, black dances the king closer to danger, a bold gambit against the encroaching white attack. Asserting control over the queenside and preparing to advance pawns into black's territory. Escaping the discovered attack's clutches, the black king boldly seeks sanctuary on the queenside's edge. Preserving attacking pressure, the queen repositions to support a potential pawn advance, aiming to exploit black's exposed king. Sacrificing the pawn to open lines is a desperate gambit that could lead to a swift checkmate if white's king is exposed. The rook's repositioning now aims to exploit the open files and potential pawn advances. Reactivating the monarch's journey, sacrificing positional integrity for a glimmer of active counterplay. Sensing opportunity, the queen re-engages, eyeing potential forks and aiming to dominate the now open queenside. Seeking refuge for the king in the chaos, but the queen's eyes are already piercing through. Opening the g-file for potential kingside invasion, this pawn push now demands attention.